Real quick before we roll this footage. Senator Patty Murray just walked into a Senate hearing and delivered one of the most comprehensive and damning indictments of Marco Rubio and the Trump administration's dismantling of American foreign policy that you are going to see anywhere on camera this year. She came prepared, she came with receipts, and she did not hold back for a single second. And Rubio's response told you everything you need to know about how this administration operates when it gets caught. Watch this.
Senator Murray.
Thank you very much, Chair Graham. Senator Schatz, welcome to your new role. I look forward to working with both of you. Secretary Rubio, I am deeply concerned that you have overseen a systemic campaign to dismantle USAID, impound billions of dollars that this committee actually provided, and unilaterally remake the Department of State without the slightest bit of concern that you lack the authority to do that without Congress. It has created chaos, it's caused preventable deaths across the globe, and it has undermined American leadership. As Ranking Member Schatz noted, what you've done is outright illegal, a complete violation of bipartisan appropriation laws, the Impoundment Control Act, and the Anti-Deficiency Act. Within hours of taking office, President Trump halted all foreign aid in flagrant defiance of the law. Now, under your watch, Secretary Rubio, that freeze was implemented with chaos and cruelty. And then you illegally shuttered USAID, placing everyone on leave, halting life-saving work, literally locking people out of the building and out of their devices, even in dangerous corners of our world. You paid people not to work, abandoned our partners across the globe, and chaotically recalled global staff, putting more than 1,600 Americans who served our country abroad in limbo. And when you shut down the USAID payment system, you even refused to pay for services provided before the illegal freeze. You fought all the way to the Supreme Court, against paying for services U.S. businesses already rendered with funding that Congress already provided. And I know you know, Mr. Secretary, but you lost. And I assume you need the reminder because to this day, you have not made all the payments that are required by our nation's highest court. And as a result, American companies continue to lay off American workers. And by the way, you do continue to lose in court, including just yesterday over your move to illegally replace the U.S. Institute of Peace Leadership, and in recent cases over international broadcasting. Now, eventually, Mr. Secretary, you sent Congress notice of your intent to collapse the USAID into state. Only you didn't consult with this committee. That's required by law. It came without justification, also required by law, and it came long after USAID was reduced to rubble. So sadly, disregard for our laws and values, to me, has sort of become a pattern of your tenor, revoking visas when someone writes an op-ed you don't like, or reaching a secret deal to use taxpayer dollars to jail U.S. residents in a notorious foreign prison, no due process, or pointlessly leaving food assistance to rot in storage. Actually, in Dubai, we now have 500 tons of high-energy biscuits that expire in July. They're bought, they're shipped, they're stored, all at taxpayer expense. But you've condemned them to waste, and that is one example of many. Now, another pattern that I'm deeply worried about is transparency. We have pressed you for information. Our staffs have sent you countless emails and briefing requests so we can do our job here. There are hundreds of unanswered requests and no effort to address them. And Mr. Secretary, that's got to change. Even your plan to reorganize the State Department came with no information on the 270 offices you are moving to eliminate, the proposed layoffs, or how USAID would be merged into state. I won't ask you whether impounding billions of dollars is legal. It is not. I won't ask you whether it's efficient to pay people not to work or fire them without determining staffing needs. But, and I won't ask you if cutting 91% of our counter-narcotic and law enforcement programs make us safer, abruptly abandoning agreements with allies makes us stronger, or ceding our global leadership to China makes us more prosperous. Of course not. We know that. We have worked together for years in a bipartisan way to advance U.S. interests and fund those programs. So with respect to my colleagues, how long are we going to sit here and watch this silently? Are we going to roll over as Trump tramples our laws and undermines our U.S. leadership, burns down what we have spent decades building, and let millions of people across our globe suffer and die? Or are we going to stand up, push back, assert our constitutional power of the purse? And to my colleagues on both sides, this is the moment to decide whether this committee continues to be a powerful bipartisan force, a force that I think we've all been proud of for a very long time, a force that is focused on safety and economic strength and national security, focused on leading the world in research and development and countering China and others with our soft power and our military power. Every single member of this committee knows what we are risking by letting this administration tear down so much. On USAID and other programs, we can always talk about how we can make things work better and other reforms. I don't think any of us are opposed to any of those considerations. We have been doing that in a bipartisan way for a long time. But that's not actually what Trump's fiscal year 2026 budget proposes. Now, Mr. Secretary, I know you would like to give a 5-minute speech back to me, but I only have a few seconds left, and I do need some information from you. As I said, we have asked and have not gotten. Can you tell me, will you share the text and details with my staff of your agreement with El Salvador and any other similar arrangements, including the funding details that we need to have?
Well, first of all, I'd like to respond to your 7-minute speech, which is primarily, I disagree like 99% of it. It's just not true. We've done nothing that's illegal. We've been in over 600 briefings to Congress. We've asked questions. We've answered questions repeatedly. We get hundreds of questions a day. We respond them as quickly as possible. And your characterization of the moves that we made
Mr. Secretary, I would just tell you, we are here because we need the information so that we can write our budget and on a bipartisan.
Well, you'll have the information you need to write a budget.
Okay, so will we get the details on the El Salvador arrangement? Yes or no?
Well, which Salvador arrangement?
Your agreement that you've made with them about.
Well, what agreement? The president of El Salvador agreed to take in 250 gangbangers, and we sent them.
Funding details we have not gotten. We need to see what the costs are.
Well, we haven't funded that. We've provided them law enforcement assistance. I know you just claimed that we cut all this law enforcement assistance. We provided El Salvador and other countries law enforcement assistance. They have the right to spend that money any way they wish, but they did us a big favor. They took 250 dangerous, trained out. We didn't deport any U.S. residents. No U.S. residents were deported.
I'm not going to argue with you on that point.
Well, there's not an argument, but don't say we deported U.S. residents, because we didn't. I don't deport anybody.
I'm not asking.
But we didn't deport U.S. residents.
I'm asking you whether we can see the details of the arrangements, including the funding details.
I'm giving you the details. The arrangements are we provide law enforcement funding to El Salvador, among other countries. How they choose to spend that money internally is up to them. But I can tell you.
Can you give me the details on the 200-plus offices you're proposing to eliminate?
Sure, we've provided that.
We need that. Can I get your commitment to give us those?
It's part of our reorg.
How about the details and justifications of your proposed rescissions from programs you claim are out of alignment with administration priorities? Are we going to get the details of that, funding priorities?
On rescissions and empowerment and things of this nature, that's obviously an OMB function, and I would talk to them about that in regard to what's going to go on with that money. I can tell you the contracts we canceled. And I can list to you the contracts we canceled and the rationale why, because I went through them myself.
Can you get those to us like today? So
the contracts?
Yes, and the funding arrangements that you've made. That's what I'm asking for.
Funding arrangements with who?
For any of the rescissions, for any of the funding, for any of the multiple congressional directives that you have given out, so that we as an appropriations committee can make our funding decisions.
Sure, you're going to have all that information when you put together a budget.
Thank you. I enjoyed that.
Welcome back to Winner's Breakdowns. I'm Winner, and if that clip did not fire you up and make you proud that there are still people in Washington willing to stand up and fight for the rule of law and the integrity of American institutions, then I need you to watch it one more time, because there is so much packed into that exchange that most people watching casually are going to miss half of what just happened. If you are new here, hit that subscribe button right now, smash that like button, drop a comment telling me exactly what you thought the moment that clip ended, because I read every single one and I genuinely want to know where you stand on everything Senator Murray laid out in that room today. Let's get into all of it. Because what you just watched was not a political performance. What you just watched was a senior United States Senator doing exactly what the founders intended Congress to do, standing up in front of a member of the executive branch and demanding accountability for actions that have caused real harm to real people all across the globe and right here at home. Senator Patty Murray walked into that hearing room with 7 minutes of documented, specific, legally grounded accusations against Marco Rubio and the Trump administration. And every single point she made was backed up by court rulings, by documented evidence, by the words of the law itself. This was not a speech driven by emotion or partisan anger. This was a senator who had done her homework, laying out a case that Rubio had absolutely no credible answer to. Let's start with the thing that I think deserves the most attention and the most outrage from every American who believes that the law applies to everybody equally regardless of how much power they hold. Senator Murray made it crystal clear that what this administration did with USAID and with the foreign aid freeze was not just a policy decision that people can disagree about in good faith. It was illegal. Not allegedly illegal. Not arguably illegal depending on how you read the statute. Illegal in the judgment of the courts, including the Supreme Court of the United States. The administration froze billions of dollars in congressionally appropriated foreign aid in defiance of the Impoundment Control Act, in defiance of the Anti-Deficiency Act, in defiance of the appropriations laws that this committee worked on in a bipartisan way for years. And when the courts told them they were wrong, when the Supreme Court of the United States ruled against them, they still did not make all the payments they were required to make. That is not a policy disagreement. That is a constitutional crisis playing out in slow motion, and most of the mainstream conversation is not treating it with anywhere near the seriousness it deserves. And I want to make sure everybody understands what that actually means in human terms, because it is easy to get lost in the legal language and the appropriations terminology and miss what is actually happening on the ground. When the Trump administration froze that foreign aid and shut down USAID the way they did, locking people out of buildings, locking people out of their devices, placing hundreds of overseas personnel in limbo, halting programs overnight without any transition plan, they were not just disrupting a bureaucracy. They were cutting off life-saving programs. They were abandoning partners in dangerous parts of the world who were depending on American commitments that had been made and funded by Congress. Senator Murray said it caused preventable deaths across the globe. That is not hyperbole. That is the documented real-world consequence of a chaotic, reckless, legally indefensible policy decision made by people who either did not think through what they were doing or did not care about the consequences for the people on the receiving end of it. And the example that Murray raised about the 500 tons of high-energy biscuits sitting in Dubai expiring in July, I want to spend a moment on that because I think it is one of the most perfectly illustrative examples of the kind of government waste and incompetence that this administration talks about fighting while simultaneously creating more of it than anyone in recent memory. These biscuits were bought with taxpayer money. They were shipped with taxpayer money. They are being stored with taxpayer money. And now because of the chaotic and illegal freeze on foreign assistance, they are going to expire in a warehouse in Dubai, having never reached a single hungry child they were meant to feed. This is what reckless executive overreach actually looks like in practice. This is not government efficiency. This is not cutting waste. This is creating waste on a massive scale while abandoning the human beings who were supposed to benefit from these programs and then having the nerve to claim you are doing it in the name of fiscal responsibility. And then there is the transparency issue that Murray raised, and I think this one does not get nearly enough attention in the broader conversation about what this administration is doing to the relationship between the executive branch and Congress. She said her office has sent countless emails, countless briefing requests, and received hundreds of unanswered responses. She said the plan to reorganize the State Department, a plan that involves eliminating 270 offices, came with no information, no justification, no detail about staffing needs or how USAID would be merged into the State Department. This is a committee that is constitutionally responsible for overseeing the spending of American taxpayer dollars on foreign policy and national security. They are supposed to have this information. The law requires that they have this information. And the administration is stonewalling them because giving Congress the information they are legally entitled to would make it impossible to pretend that what they are doing is lawful, organized, or in the national interest. And watch Rubio's response to all of this because I think it tells you everything you need to know about how this administration deals with legitimate oversight and legitimate legal questions. He said he disagreed with 99% of what Murray said. He said they had done nothing illegal. He said they had provided over 600 briefings to Congress. But when Murray got specific, when she asked about the details of the El Salvador agreement, when she asked about the 270 offices being eliminated, when she asked about the funding details of the rescissions, suddenly Rubio did not have specific answers ready. Suddenly it was the El Salvador arrangement turned into what agreement, what president took in 250 gangbangers. Suddenly the details of the reorganization were something that had been provided but he could not point to where. Suddenly the funding information for the rescissions was an OMB function and she should talk to them about it. This is the playbook. Deny everything in broad strokes, provide nothing specific, redirect every concrete question into a different conversation, and run out the clock. It is the same playbook this administration uses every single time it faces genuine congressional oversight. And the reason it works, the reason they keep using it, is that not enough people are watching closely enough to notice when the broad denial does not match the specific evasion. But Murray noticed. And she called it out precisely and professionally and without losing her composure for a single second, which I think deserves enormous credit because sitting across from that level of dismissiveness and bad faith and still maintaining the kind of measured, focused determination that she showed in that room is genuinely difficult to do. I want to talk about the national security implications of what Murray laid out because I think this is the piece of the argument that should be resonating with every American regardless of their politics. She talked about cuts to counter-narcotics programs. She talked about cuts to law enforcement cooperation programs. She talked about abruptly abandoning agreements with allies. She talked about ceding American global leadership to China. These are not small things. These are not bureaucratic inconveniences. American soft power, the ability of the United States to influence events, build relationships, counter adversaries, and shape outcomes around the world without firing a shot, is built over decades of patient consistent engagement through exactly the kinds of programs that this administration has been dismantling with a chainsaw. And once you dismantle that infrastructure, once you break those relationships, once you tell partners around the world that American commitments are subject to being reversed overnight without notice or explanation, you cannot just rebuild it when the political winds change. The trust is gone. The relationships are damaged. The vacuum you created gets filled by somebody else, and right now that somebody else is China, and they are more than happy to step into every space that American retreat creates. Senator Murray was absolutely right to stand up and ask her colleagues on both sides of the aisle how long they are going to watch this happen silently. How long are they going to sit there while the executive branch tramples the constitutional authority of Congress to control the purse strings of the federal government? How long are they going to allow billions of dollars in congressionally appropriated funds to be impounded in defiance of the law and the courts? How long are they going to accept stonewalling and evasion in response to legitimate oversight requests? These are questions that every member of that committee needs to answer for themselves and for their constituents, because the precedent being set right now goes far beyond any individual policy disagreement. If Congress allows the executive branch to ignore appropriations law, ignore court orders, and refuse to provide information to oversight committees without consequence, then Congress has effectively surrendered its constitutional role as a co-equal branch of government. And that is a loss for every American regardless of which party they vote for. The Democrats on this committee and in Congress more broadly need to keep doing exactly what Senator Murray did in that room today. Keep showing up. Keep asking specific questions. Keep building the documented record of evasion and non-compliance. Keep making the legal case clearly and precisely and loudly enough that the American people can hear it and understand what is actually at stake. Because the administration is counting on the complexity of appropriations law and foreign policy to keep most Americans from engaging with what is happening. They are counting on the fact that terms like Impoundment Control Act and Anti-Deficiency Act sound technical and boring and will make people tune out before they understand the significance of what is being violated. Do not tune out. This matters. The rule of law matters. Congressional oversight matters. American leadership in the world matters. The lives of the people who depend on the programs being dismantled matter. So drop a comment and tell me what hit you hardest in that clip. Was it the preventable deaths caused by the foreign aid freeze? Was it the 500 tons of food rotting in a Dubai warehouse? Was it Rubio's dismissive non-answers to every specific question Murray asked? Was it the broader point about China filling the vacuum that American retreat is creating around the world? I want to hear all of it because this is exactly the kind of conversation Winners Breakdowns was built for. If you believe that nobody is above the law, that Congress has a constitutional responsibility to hold the executive branch accountable, and that American leadership in the world is worth fighting for, then you know exactly what to do right now. Hit that subscribe button, smash that like, and share this video with everybody in your life who needs to understand what is actually happening in these hearings and why it matters for every single one of us. This has been Winners Breakdowns. Stay informed, stay engaged, stay fired up about the things that actually matter, and I will catch you in the next one.